Welcome to the NoJetStress Podcast, where we explore traveler wellbeing solutions for business and frequent flyers seeking to conquer jet lag and live healthier lives. I'm your host, Christopher Babayode, ex-flight attendant, traveler wellbeing advocate, nutritional therapist, and author. In this episode of the NoJetStress Podcast, I'm pleased to welcome Alexander Dimitrov from AYO Technology, which is the maker of the circadian glasses. He is a founder and CCO of the organization.
Pleasure is all mine.
Alexander, I'd like to start with this. In the beginning, God said, "Let there be light." And AYO Technology took that to heart and ran with it. I really feel the importance and the crucial role that light therapy can play, particularly in general health, but also quite specifically in traveler well-being health. It's on that basis that I thought you would be a good organization to reach out to because you're doing amazing things with your light therapy glasses. I wanted to hear from you what that journey's been like, applications to traveler well-being audiences, which is my core demographic, as well as the wider implications for well-being for all of us. I mention it in this manner quite specifically because I've also had Mickey Bayer-Clausen, the co-founder of the Time Shifter app, which is known in the travel space as being one of the better apps that understands the dynamic of circadian biology and how it manages the light exposure for travelers who are getting different exposures of light as they go about their frequent travel. When I had Mickey Bayer-Clausen on the podcast, he made a prediction. He said the circadian economy in 5 years will be so big and so relevant that we won't be able to get away from talking about circadian health. And lo and behold, it's not been 2 years now, and here I am talking to you, which ties into that specific prediction, and you've managed to come to market with a product that really speaks to the heart of that because, according to him and the science, some of the biggest movers that relate to our health are our light exposure. So given that background and the fulfillment of that prophecy, if you like, please tell me a bit more about yourself first, and then we'll dive into the story of AYO Technology. I have a slight aside though. My heritage is Nigerian, and I don't know if you've heard this before, but AYO is actually my middle name, and it's a name from the Yoruba tradition, and it means joy. It's normally appended, so I feel doubly fortunate to be able to talk to you.
Well, I gotta say, this is no coincidence because we were also inspired first by the word AYO. It's catchy, it's short, people loved it. But once we found out about the meaning of joy, we said, yeah, light brings joy. So it makes perfect sense. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be sitting with you and talking about AYO in that regard. I fully agree with what you mentioned. We are obviously strong believers of circadian health and the circadian shift. We see circadian health as a foundation to general health because it touches upon any physiological process you can think of, which is of crucial importance. Circadian rhythm impacts sleep, mood, performance, metabolism, and many other things that we'll touch upon today. And great that you mentioned Mickey from Time Shifter. We've been connected, and I think that what they're doing is fantastic. And just a quick comment on May There Be Light. We like saying and referring to AYO as wear the light. Of course, we also always advise people, if they're able to, go get the daylight. There is nothing better, in the scientific community is very clear on that. If you want light, go get the daylight or the sunlight. So if you're able to do that, by all means, go and get it. But what we've seen from our experience is that the vast majority of people are actually not having the fortune to go every day at similar times, wake up and go get daylight. Could be due to geography, could be due to where they live, where they work, and many other things. So that's why we decided to develop AYO. And it actually was driven by a personal need by me and my co-founder. I'm from Bulgaria originally. I moved to the Netherlands more than a decade ago to do my master's studies, where I met Branislav, who is my co-founder, and he is from Serbia, which is a neighboring country. And in both of these countries in winter, you tend to have also sunny days. They're shorter, but they're not as short as the days could be in the Netherlands, in the UK as well, in certain states, in Canada, etc. So you're lacking the light. And when we moved and we experienced this firsthand, we were not really sure what it is and how to cope with it. So we had this winter blues in a way. It was mostly affected by our not that much mental state, but rather how focused we are, how alert we are during the day. And we were, what does it mean? How can you cope with that? And being in the Netherlands, we found out about light therapy, mostly by Philips, as it was the biggest producer at that time of light therapy in the region. There were different products on the market, those light therapy lamps or boxes. And we tried them and they were great. We felt better, more kind of agile, more mentally ready. And also it was helping us, but also we were using them in the wrong time because it was not very clear. There were not a lot of instructions and we were using it sometimes in the evening to help us kind of study and prepare for an upcoming exam. But in the end, what happened is that it kept us awake for a big part of the night. And also, if people are familiar with those lamps, it's a lamp. You put it on your desk, you need to stay in front of it, static, arm's length, specific angle. It illuminates the whole room. So if you're sharing a room with a partner, that might not be appreciated. Or if you want to move around freely, it's not possible. So that's why what drives us to develop something which is a wearable, a light therapy product. And that's basically the idea behind it. We wanted to develop something that is a solution for our need at that time, and then provide it to the masses, provide it to as many people as possible, because we saw how big of a need there is for a light therapy product like that. And initially the goal was to focus on SED or winter blues and to fit this need. But then we saw how much people could benefit from a device like that nowadays, when we spend over 95% of our time indoors for situations like jet lag or shift work or just general day-to-day, how you can help your body to cope with these changes. Especially very relevant nowadays is the daylight savings time that the US past weekend, they moved to the daylight savings time. Here in Europe, we are moving end of the month, but it's obviously a big toll on our sleep and energy and whatnot. And we can also discuss that and what could be best practices there.
To underline that very point, Dr. Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep. I was recently listening to a clip of his. I mean, he mentions it in the book, but the clip specifically mentions that we are even more vulnerable to accidents, mishaps, and deleterious effects of not getting the right amount of light when these clocks go forward. Not so much when they go back, because we gain an hour, so to speak,
exactly.
When they go forward. So that pretty much underlines what you're saying there as well. The idea that natural light and how much we're exposed to really does matter, and it needs to be taken seriously. I do think at one point there was some talk of abolishing daylight savings, but I can't remember whether that came from Europe or from the States. But case in point, and underlined quite particularly well, I would say, for sure.
I think the scientific community is very clear on that, and it is keep the standard time, abolish the daylight savings time, because it's just better for health of people. And as you mentioned, there is increase of accidents, increase of heart failures, increase of these occurrences on the day when that happens, when we switch to daylight savings time. And indeed, some states, I think, have abolished this in the US, and there is a bigger topic discussion on that in the US. In Europe, we kind of had it before COVID, when the European Parliament allowed people to vote, and they said we don't want to change the times anymore. It was not clear whether it will go towards daylight savings to be the permanent or the standard, but it was, they don't want to change it. But then COVID happened, and just the political agenda is completely different nowadays. But I think it's a big topic, and the science has more than enough data points to show us what is better, and this is keeping the standard time.
Just before we move on to the science and the exciting product that you have, there's one other thing I want to underline, which you said, and it bears repeating again. And it kind of works its way into the reason why I feel it's such a good fit for my audience, is the idea, and you did mention it, that you cannot always guarantee to get the same exposure to the quality of light that would be beneficial to your circadian rhythm. And therefore, something like AYO Technology steps in and provides that. We'll get into the interface of the app a bit later as well. But that is worth repeating as well, because it gives you that flexibility. And I, for one, don't want to get on my flight at 7 o'clock in the morning with a big, sad light with me, because that's the best I can do to make a reset happen. So practically wise, that is so important to grasp. And as you say, I think we're far away from being able to beat nature at its own game. But when we can work alongside it, like AYO Technology circadian glasses does, it's worth remembering and putting them to good use.
Absolutely, I agree to that.
Talk to me about the science a bit more. We don't have to nerd out too much. I'm sure you'll out-nerd me anyway.
There are a few important topics that we started covering already. One is circadian health, which is how aligned we are with our circadian rhythm. And the circadian rhythm is an internal clock, a master clock that orchestrates the vast majority of brain and body functions that are crucial for our existence, such as sleep, mood, metabolism, immune response, alertness, and many others. So what we want to achieve is support the circadian rhythm so that these processes take place at the right time during the day. And the best way to support the circadian rhythm is the so-called zeitgebers, or influencers of the circadian rhythm, are light, food timing, and exercise. Light arguably having the biggest impact, light and darkness, and then food timing having close to that also big effect, and exercise as well as kind of the three biggest factors. There are other things that can impact the circadian rhythm, such as caffeine intake, stress, and other things, but we can focus more on these three, predominantly light and darkness. So what we want to focus on during the day, or when we want to be active, because for some the day could be at night for shift workers or cabin crew and pilots. So when we want to be active, we want to get light, because what the light does, whether that's bright light from the sun or bright light from a light therapy lamp, or blue light, which is, according to the scientific community, having the biggest effect on supporting the circadian rhythm, what the light does, it suppresses melatonin, which is the sleep hormone, so it makes us more awake, and also helps our body to increase and produce serotonin and cortisol, which make us more alert, more focused, and improve our mood. And by doing that at the right time of the day, we help our bodies to also produce melatonin at night, or when we plan to go to bed. So the light, what it does, it on one side helps us wake up, but it also helps us to promote the production of the sleep hormone melatonin at night.
What I see as a similar pattern or corollary is, in a sense, it has an aspect of what I would understand to be an adaptogen. If you take a true adaptogen in the morning, it's almost as if it can read the biochemical signature in the body, and it works down a specific type of process to produce an effect. And then if you take that same adaptogen in the evening, when the biochemical signature of your body in certain regards has changed, it will produce another different effect. And they're complementary in as much as that you can say that it has an intelligence to know what it needs to help move when it's applied. And you're talking about light, or good quality light, in that regard, in that respect. Case in point, the AYO glasses that I'm wearing now is giving me an indication that I should put them on between 6 o'clock in the evening and 9:30. But I might be thinking, if I'm thinking of just one mode of operation, I'm thinking, oh, no, it's in the morning I need to use it. Why is it doing this? But it's because it can see where I'm delayed or out of rhythm. And this is a corrective measure. So I think that's quite good to understand as well.
Definitely. Yeah, the timing is essential for light exposure, for a food intake as well. So we know that if you have breakfast early in the morning, it's going to have a different effect than having a late night dinner, because then at night the metabolism slows down, and you want to support your rhythm with the right quality and type of food at the right time. So there are different examples we'll touch upon flying or traveling. And for example, flying westwards, then you would need to get daylight, or if not, use another light therapy device in the evening so that you delay your rhythm, so that you go to bed later and wake up later to adapt to the new time zones. There are cases when evening exposure to light is actually more beneficial for your specific case, depending on what you'd like to achieve. Though in most cases, people would be getting light exposure during the day when they want to be active and get the most out of the day.
Right. Before I forget, we mentioned Zeitgebers, which is German for time givers. So in a sense, I think I've heard discussions of hard and fast Zeitgebers, which I understand to be the three that you mentioned, which are also outlined in the Circadian Code by Sachin Panda. What about social Zeitgebers? Are there any that are worth mentioning?
Definitely. I think that the social life or the social rhythm is a big aspect that can influence the circadian rhythm. And ideally, you would want to align all of these rhythms. For example, in the case of Spain, which people here tend to eat very late, both lunch and dinner. It can go up to 10 p.m., 11 p.m. in summer. And there might be a reason for that when, especially in the south of Spain during the summer, it's very warm. So you don't really feel like going out and having a dinner. But still, I think it's still too late. And it's one of the reasons for that is because if you look into Spain on the map, you see that it aligns more with the meridian on similar to Portugal and the UK. So in a way, it's late, and that's why everything happens later. And one could argue that this might not be the best for your health, for your circadian health, because having a very late dinner at 11 p.m. and then the next morning you need to be at 9 at work, how much time is left for your body to process the food, have the proper sleep, wake up and be at work because they're not starting much later. I think that even though there are different social norms and let's say social rhythm, it's not necessarily always the case that it would work for your health. It might be against you in some cases.
Okay. So I use a variety of lights, as you might be able to tell. I think the first excited picture I sent you was of me with a red light wearing AYO Technology. So I use red lights in the evening. I have a light panel in my bedroom, and I find that quite useful. And I understand that uses particular ranges of light. I think anywhere from 620 up to 870 or something like that for it to work. What kind of light are we talking about with the AYO Technology glasses? And how did you land on those as being ideal? I ask that because I love the function that it provides at the end, where it does actually offer a couple of minutes of red light as a finisher offer. So, and I understand also that red light specifically at a particular frequency in the eye is beneficial for eye health.
Exactly. So first, about the blue light, with circadian blue light around 470 nanometers, what we did, we followed the best scientific studies when we started developing the product more than a decade ago. And then once we had the product out, we started taking part in different research projects. Now we take part in more than 20, some of them published and finalized with our product to validate further the technology. Although we knew that using the existing scientific literature, it's already a scientifically backed and based product. We use blue light because at that time, from our understanding, that was the most studied type of light. And also what the blue light does is with, let's say, shorter duration, you can get a better effect compared to white light, for example, for supporting the circadian rhythm. Though different studies might be showing different effects, we have decided to go with blue light because at that time it was, from our understanding, the most studied. So that's what we stick to, and that's what we've been validating throughout the years with the research projects we take part in. For example, a recently published study in an independent journal was conducted by the US Department of Defense in the naval submarines. They used blue light blocking glasses to help them improve performance and reduce sleep problems, improve sleep quality. The study was already finalized in 2020, but due to COVID and other things, it took quite some time for the study to be finally published in an independent journal. Another study was conducted with the University of Reykjavik that was focused on the general population for improving sleep and reducing sleep problems. So it showed that AYO does that. We take part in many other different types of studies, which are all very exciting. For example, we have a study that started recently with Qantas Airlines that's focused on pilot fatigue. So using AYO to help them with fatigue management, because you're probably aware that in airlines, bigger topic is not that much jet lag, but rather fatigue management for pilots who are constantly crossing time zones and then flying back. Many times they're left with less than 48 hours to adapt to the new destination. So it doesn't really make it practical, or the body is not able to adapt to a new destination that quick. And it's also, again, it's not really practical for them because they have another flight maybe in another direction. And that's why they typically would keep their circadian rhythm closer to the home base. And that's why fatigue management could be even more important. And we have other studies focused on cancer-related fatigue or neurodegenerative diseases, also with some military departments. So it's, a lot of exciting things are happening and a lot of very interesting.
On that note, I must say, the very first time I heard of a product that was similar to yours, I would say, was actually from Australia. And it was about 10, 15 years ago.
There are a handful of light therapy glasses worldwide. There are a few brands similar to ours. We were aware of them. It's actually quite a large market and it's expanding. We've been familiar with the products and we even know the founders. And obviously it's a small world in a way.
Yeah.
And obviously each product is different. It's mostly the design, and also in our case, you have the app support, red light, and other functionalities that make it different. So there is this common misconception that blue light is bad, that the media has been telling us for quite some time. And the thing is that any light could be bad if you use it at the wrong time. The reason for blue light predominantly saying that it's bad is because a lot of people have been using electronic device and other at night, which can influence your potentially sleep-wake cycle and make you fall asleep harder, etc. But what the science tells us, especially in the last few years, there have been some findings, is that it's not that much the type of light that can impact your sleep-wake cycle. It's more even the intensity of light. So the best advice I can give to people at night if they want to wind down is just dim the lights. And that's what we mentioned in the app as well. Yes, potentially blue light or white light. If you're in a hospital or a supermarket with the big white light panels, they can be more stimulating for you. But the reason for that is even more the strength of light. So dimming the lights is already a very good step towards winding down, and a very important one. And then whatever helps you to wind down, whether that's, a warmer light, a candle light, or salt lamp, or any red light could help as well, potentially. Though any light is alerting. It's rather the intensity of the light that is having a bigger effect on your sleep-wake cycle.
Right. So in tune with that then, because I've heard, or one of the questions I posed to Mickey Bear Clausen was, what does he think of blue light blockers? And he was like, it wasn't like no, but it was like, hey, if you've got sunglasses and that's all you've got, go with sunglasses. I got some of the first pairs of True Dark glasses. And a funny story about that is that I got them and I used them religiously. And it was about the time when I believed and we were told, blue light is absolutely a no-no. You don't need any of it. So when I had started using those, I think I used them for about 2 years or so. And then one of the arms broke. I went to source another pair to replace them. And I found that the lenses I got were not as dark as the original. And I queried that. And to his credit, the founder of the company, I think it's Block Blue Light, they work out of the UK, sent a personal message saying, yes, the science has moved on. And this is the reason why your lenses may not be as dark as the ones you originally had. And I thought, yeah, I guess, that's the nature of things. We learn things as we go along. And then I also listened to a podcast of Andrew Huberman, who's professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology, which has to do with the eyes. And he had another expert colleague of his on, and he totally blew this idea that blue light is bad for you out of the water. So, again, I take it, as you say, it's to do with the intensity and how you use it as opposed to it being bad. But I guess it always plays well to make a villain out of something in order to get the point across in marketing, right? So that's great. So before, I'm chomping at the bit here, before we dive into the very specifics of travelers and frequent flyers and how this can help, even though we've touched on it a bit, what are the wider implications can you go into a bit more detail about the wider implications for general health for people who may not necessarily be frequent travelers? There is a use case to be made for being able to use a tool like this to increase alertness or decrease alertness as your workday evolves. And therefore, there's a lot of usefulness for those types of people as well.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you very much for bringing this point. I'll be happy to explain. And one thing I forgot to mention is, what does it mean to be aligned with your circadian rhythm, right? What does it mean to live in sync with this internal clock? And what it means is that you have higher alertness, you have higher productivity, you have better mood, you sleep better. To achieve that, typically you'd want to go to bed, wake up similar times, kind of stick to this rhythm, so without too much circadian disruption. And you'd want to provide the right signals, meaning light, food, caffeine, know when to do that and things like that, so that you can support your rhythm. Because if you go into the other extreme, which is the circadian disruption, that could be driven by frequent traveling. So it could be something very acute. For example, you have one trip a year, which is long haul, and you're going on a vacation, and then you have, especially when you fly back, could be that you have very bad jet lag. So this could be acute, and we all know how it feels. It's, brain fog, you're sleepy at the wrong time, you cannot fall asleep at night, you might have stomach issues and things like that. Or it could be something that could potentially become chronic, where we talk about pilots or we talk about shift workers who might be having this circadian disruption for a prolonged period of time. Unfortunately, that could be quite impactful for your circadian rhythm. It can basically increase the risk of getting more or less any modern disease you can think of, such as obesity, diabetes, heart disease, or cancer, because you're just not living in sync with your circadian rhythm. So it's really important to support this rhythm. That's why we think it's a new foundation to general health, because it really impacts how you feel, how you live. You basically live better and you live longer if you're living in sync with your rhythm. With that being said, as you said, there are a lot of challenges that can put you off your circadian rhythm alignment. Not only when you're traveling, but also in the day-to-day. There is something called social jet lag that some people might be aware of. This basically could happen for you to kind of shift your internal clock without really going through a different time zone. And this could happen if you go out on a Friday night. Let's say you go to bed 3 hours later and then you wake up 3 hours later, or because your body is so used to waking up at that time, you might wake up at the same time, so be sleep deprived. So there are different things that can affect how you feel and your sleep, and obviously your immune system goes down. So it can have a similar effect to, let's say, being jet lagged without you traveling. And in any of these examples, of course, sticking to the right time of using light, so continuing with what you have been doing, potentially if you're maintaining your rhythm, could be quite beneficial. Especially, of course, time change now with daylight savings time and in autumn, that could mess up your rhythm. So you might benefit from getting light exposure at the right time. Or if, for example, it's winter, you're living in a place where you don't get a lot of daylight, or nowadays we just spend too much time indoors. We wake up, it's dark outside, we go in the car and commute to work, we spend the day in the office, and then when we come back, it's already dark outside. So we're not getting these light stimulus that we need. There are many different examples how light could be beneficial for you. And that's why we, as I mentioned, with our device, we could cater to a large area of people now, not only the benefits of the device, but also because our lives have changed now. After COVID, a lot of people work from home, meaning we work long hours and stay more time indoors and things like that.
Yeah. Mickey mentioned specifically, and I think I was so surprised because I didn't know any better, but he mentioned you can actually have two people in the same location, but on different times without travel involved at all. And I think that came up in conversation because Till Runenberg, the author of
Chronotype Questionnaire, yes.
Chronotype.
The author of the internal clock and
Yes, uses the jet lag example in a particular way, or maybe it was my understanding. But basically, when I was talking to Mickey, it was like, okay, so you can have two people in the same location, and they can be literally on different time zones, so to speak. And that, from that conversation and from what you're saying, seems to be just due to this fact that we might be inside too long and we gradually sort of like lose time, if you like, and therefore shift. I love the example that you used, going out partying one night and then, not making up or making it up and being sleep deprived. All these things can actually impact you so much so that you are less productive, less healthier. And one of the better, simpler remedies harkens back to nature and making sure we get that light exposure. And I used to say when I was talking to prospects and clients that if you can eat, sleep, and move, you can actually take the farewell methodology and make it work for you, because it's all about realigning ourselves with nature. One of the specific things I try to do when I talk to people about jet lag in particular and traveler well-being is highlight to them that the aircraft cabin is an alien environment. And I call it that because at altitude, you get inordinate exposure to light, which is doing something to you unless you take control of that. And therefore, again, getting back to nature is really the way to go. So with that said, traveler-specific scenarios, would you have any suggestions for my audience that's listening about how they might like to use or consider using it? And I truly believe that in this modern age, every business traveler or frequent traveler should have a kit. And right now, I think AYO Technology qualifies to be in that kit as something that people can use alongside other wearables. Can you speak to that as to what you would think use cases for frequent travelers are? But then I would say, what would you say to someone who's not necessarily understanding how it might be useful to them? Join us in part 2 for the concluding conversation. In the meantime, for the month of April, use code NoJetStress at ayo.com to get 20% off of AYO's circadian glasses. In the meantime, wherever you go, farewell.